Evil is often imagined as a dramatic, monstrous force, loud, obvious, terrifying. But in truth, it usually wears a quieter mask. It shows up as manipulation, deceit, exploitation, and control. It doesn't announce itself. It slides in subtly, cloaked in charm or authority, often smiling while it wounds. The real danger is not just in what evil does, but in how it invites you to mirror it, how it tempts you to respond with the same venom it poured into your life. When you are wronged, betrayed, or manipulated, the first impulse is to strike back, to give pain for pain, to hurt as you were hurt. It feels just, it feels fair. But this is where many fall, not because they lost the battle, but because they abandoned their values to win it. True power is not in destruction. It is in discipline. It is in the rare radical choice to rise above the darkness without becoming it. To win against evil without revenge is not weakness. It is supremacy of the soul, because anyone can react. Anyone can curse, scream, plot, and retaliate. But very few can face manipulation, injustice, or cruelty and still choose to stand in their own light. Revenge screams that it is powerful, but in reality, it is a puppet, controlled by the very people and pain it seeks to overcome. Manipulators don't need your trust to control you. They need your attention. They feed off your energy, your reaction, your emotional entanglement with them. They thrive when you believe that defeating them means engaging them on their terms. That is the lie. The truth is far simpler. You do not defeat darkness by fighting it with more darkness. You defeat it by making it irrelevant, by rising so far above its reach that it can no longer touch you. This is not about being passive. It is about being deliberate. It is about choosing a higher road, not because you are afraid to fight, but because you are wise enough to know which battles destroy the warrior. It is not a call to be silent in the face of abuse. It is a call to respond with power, not poison. It is about learning how to protect yourself without poisoning yourself in the process. Because every time you act from rage, from revenge, from ego, you lose something of yourself. Even if you win the argument, even if you silence the manipulator, even if you prove your point, the goal is not to show them they were wrong. The goal is to live in such a way that their actions no longer define you. Their manipulation no longer moves you. Their games no longer matter. This is the deeper win. Not the moment of triumph in conflict, but the quiet victory of freedom. The kind of victory that doesn't need applause, doesn't need witnesses, because it is felt deeply, privately, and permanently. Winning against evil means you are no longer controlled by it. It means you've reclaimed the authority over your peace, your thoughts, your energy. Manipulators want to keep you reactive, angry, and off balance. That's how they hold power. But when you become calm, clear, and centered, they lose access. You no longer dance to their tune. You're no longer a character in their narrative. You become untouchable, not by aggression, but by elevation. There is a power more commanding than revenge, more lasting than anger, more transformative than punishment. It is the strength of restraint. It is the clarity to see through deception and still choose peace. It is the confidence to walk away when pride wants to stay and fight. And it is the wisdom to understand that the greatest victory is not when they suffer. It is when you no longer do. Let this be the foundation for everything that follows. Winning the right way is not about outsmarting evil. It is about outgrowing it. Not because you are weak, but because you are beyond it. You are no longer ruled by their actions, nor trapped by your reactions. You are free. And freedom, real freedom, is the one thing no manipulator can ever take from you. Revenge is one of the most seductive lies ever told. It whispers that it will make things right, that it will restore balance, that it will satisfy the deep ache created by betrayal or cruelty. It promises closure, justice, and dignity. But in truth, revenge delivers none of these things. Instead, it turns your pain into a cycle. It binds you to the person who hurt you. It keeps the wound open by forcing you to focus not on healing, but on punishment. And as long as you're focused on hurting them, they still control you. They may no longer be present in your life, but they own your mind, your time, your energy. Revenge doesn't free you from the past. It drags you back into it again and again. There is a dangerous satisfaction that comes with the idea of giving someone what they deserve. But what often goes unnoticed is how much of yourself you must sacrifice to do it. When you step into the arena of vengeance, you are not just aiming a weapon at your enemy. You're also aiming it at your own peace. The desire to hurt, humiliate, or destroy someone else might feel powerful in the moment, but it is ultimately a form of self-abandonment. You trade your values for a fleeting emotional high. You trade your dignity for a moment of domination. And when the dust settles, you're left with the realization that nothing has truly changed. The damage is still done. The past is still the past. And now, instead of healing from your wounds, you've added new ones you gave yourself. The idea that revenge is the only path to justice is a trick of the ego. It is rooted in fear. The fear of looking weak, of being disrespected, of losing control. But strength is not in destruction. Strength is in discipline. Real justice is not emotional, reactive, or impulsive. It is grounded, wise, and often silent. It doesn't seek to humiliate, but to restore balance. And many times, the most just thing you can do is walk away and rebuild yourself. Not because they won, but because they are no longer worth your destruction. When you seek revenge, you mirror the very behavior you claim to hate. You lower yourself to the level of the manipulator, the abuser, the liar. You become so focused on proving them wrong that you lose sight of who you are. That is not victory. That is defeat disguised as empowerment. True power is when you no longer need them to suffer for you to be free. You no longer need their downfall to feel like you've risen. You've already risen because you didn't let them pull you into their darkness. Let them be who they are. Let the universe, time, or truth take care of what is theirs. Your role is not to destroy. Your role is to rise. Let revenge die so your peace can live. Let go of the illusion and you'll find a strength far greater than control. It is freedom. And freedom is the only answer that evil can't touch. Manipulators do not operate with brute force. They operate with subtlety. Their power lies not in what they openly say or do, but in what they imply, distort, and conceal. They don't need to shout to control you. In fact, they prefer not to. Manipulation thrives in quiet influence, emotional confusion, and the gradual erosion of boundaries. A manipulator's greatest tool is psychological distortion, making you question what you saw, what you felt, and eventually who you are. The strength of a manipulator is not their intelligence. It's their ability to create doubt and feed off emotional reactions. They don't overpower you. They trick you into overpowering yourself. The tactics they use are rarely obvious at first. Gaslighting is one of the most common tools in their arsenal. This involves deliberately making you question your memory, your perceptions, and even your sanity. They'll say things like, "You're overreacting," or "That never happened," until you start wondering if maybe you are the problem. Over time, you become more dependent on their version of reality than your own. Another favorite tactic is guilt tripping, using your empathy against you. They'll remind you of everything they've done for you, framing their manipulation as love or sacrifice, and casting your resistance as betrayal. You begin to feel bad for defending yourself. And when guilt doesn't work, they may switch to silent treatment, withholding affection, approval, or attention until you comply. Charm is another powerful weapon in the manipulator's toolkit. Many manipulators don't begin with cruelty, they begin with flattery. They praise, they listen. They seem to understand you like no one else ever has. This phase builds a false sense of safety and intimacy. Once trust is earned, they begin to test limits. A little push here, a small lie there, just enough to see if you'll accept it. And when you do, the real manipulation begins. What once felt like love, friendship, or leadership becomes a web of control. But because it started with charm, victims often feel confused, torn between the memory of the warmth and the reality of the harm. Understanding these tactics is the first form of liberation. Naming them breaks their spell. When you recognize the game, you no longer have to play it. Awareness turns confusion into clarity, and clarity is the beginning of power. Manipulators count on you not seeing the patterns. They count on your silence, your shame, your self-doubt. But the moment you learn to observe instead of react, to analyze instead of internalize, their power begins to collapse. They rely on deception. But once you see the truth, deception has no more control. You begin to reclaim your mind, your boundaries, and your choices. The manipulator's greatest fear is exposure, not to the world, but to your awareness. Because once you stop reacting blindly, once you understand what they are doing, you become unmanageable. You become sovereign. Their tactics may continue, but they no longer reach you. That is the beginning of your quiet, unstoppable victory. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. It is not coldness, indifference, or a lack of empathy. It is not shutting down your heart or turning off your humanity. Emotional detachment is clarity. It is the deliberate choice to protect your inner peace rather than allow it to be hijacked by someone else's chaos. Manipulators depend on emotional reaction. They don't care if your reaction is love, anger, guilt, or fear, only that they can provoke something that keeps you entangled. If they can stir your emotions, they can steer your decisions. But when you become emotionally detached, you no longer respond on their terms. You create a space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you regain your power. This is not easy. Emotional detachment requires discipline. It means learning how to observe your own emotional state without becoming overwhelmed by it. It means recognizing when your feelings are being manipulated and choosing not to let those feelings dictate your actions. Manipulators want you impulsive. They want you confused. They want you either defending yourself or chasing their approval. But when you detach emotionally, you stop needing their validation. You stop explaining yourself. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to fix what was never your fault. Detachment is not a retreat from feeling. It is a return to balance. One of the most powerful aspects of detachment is neutrality. When you no longer react with intense emotion, you become unreadable. Manipulators can no longer predict you, control you, or provoke you. Your silence becomes a shield. Your calm becomes unsettling to those who thrive on creating storms. They expect panic, tears, or rage. Instead, they meet poise. They meet stillness. And in that stillness, their control collapses because their power is not rooted in who they are. It's rooted in how much they can make you forget who you are. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring selectively. You reserve your energy for what's true, healthy, and aligned with your values. You learn to say no, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. You stop explaining your worth. You stop arguing over lies. You stop fighting to be understood by those who are only listening for ammunition. Detachment gives you back your life, your voice, your time. It creates the emotional distance needed to see clearly and respond strategically, not emotionally, not impulsively, but intentionally. The greatest strength in a battle with manipulation is not aggression. It is emotional control. When your peace becomes unshakable, you are no longer a puppet on their strings. You become grounded, steady, and untouchable. This is how you win. Not by matching their chaos, but by mastering your calm. The storm may still rage around you, but inside you are still. That stillness is your superpower. And once you've tasted it, you'll never give it away again. The moment you begin to reclaim your inner authority is the moment you stop looking outside yourself for permission, validation, or direction. Manipulators excel at stealing this authority. They do it subtly, through criticism disguised as concern, through control masked as care, through expectations that slowly replace your own instincts. Over time, you may begin to doubt your voice, second-guess your choices, or feel the need to check in with others before trusting your own judgment. That's not just insecurity. That's conditioning. It's what happens when someone else's voice becomes louder than your own. Reclaiming your inner authority is the act of silencing that noise, not with rebellion, but with clarity. At the core of inner authority is self-trust. And self-trust isn't something you either have or don't. It's something you rebuild. It starts with small decisions. It starts with listening to your intuition and acting on it, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Manipulators create fog. They make things seem more complicated than they are, so you'll stay dependent on their interpretation. But clarity is always within you. You've simply been taught to ignore it. Reclaiming your inner authority is about remembering that your gut is not a weakness, your feelings are not liabilities, and your mind is capable of discerning truth if you give it permission to lead again. Boundaries are a natural result of inner authority. When you begin to respect your own voice, you stop tolerating people who try to mute it. You stop allowing guilt to be used as a weapon. You no longer stay silent just to keep the peace, because you understand that peace built on silence is not peace at all, it's submission. Reclaiming your authority doesn't always mean confrontation. It often means quiet, firm decisions made from a place of self-respect. You don't need to argue, explain, or prove anything. When you own your worth, it speaks louder than words ever could. Manipulators will sense this shift. They will push harder at first. They'll accuse you of changing. They'll claim you've become cold, selfish, or ungrateful. But what's really happening is this. You're no longer moldable. You're no longer emotionally dependent. You're no longer easy to bend. And to someone who once thrived on your compliance, that feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal. It's liberation. Their discomfort is not your problem to solve. Your responsibility is not to stay small so others feel big. Your responsibility is to rise into your own power without apology. When you reclaim your inner authority, you no longer live on defense. You lead. You choose. You set the terms of your life instead of reacting to the terms others impose on you. This is not arrogance. It's alignment. It's not about dominating others, but about no longer allowing yourself to be dominated. From that place, manipulation becomes ineffective. Control loses its grip, and you, for the first time in a long time, feel like yourself again. Not the version shaped by fear, but the one anchored in truth. That is where real power lives. Silence is often mistaken for weakness. In a world that prizes noise, speed, and reaction, silence is seen as passive, something to be broken, filled, or questioned. But silence, when used with intention, is one of the most powerful strategies against manipulation, because manipulators thrive on engagement. They need reactions to anchor their control. They bait you with drama, provoke you with accusations, and lure you into endless debates where they twist your words and rewrite the narrative. Every time you engage, you fuel their influence. But silence disrupts the cycle. It's not retreat, it's refusal. It says, I will not participate in your dysfunction. There's a certain discomfort in choosing silence, especially when you've been conditioned to defend yourself. You want to explain your point. You want to correct the lie. You want to make them see the truth. But that urge is exactly what they count on. The more you speak, the more they manipulate. They are not listening to understand. They're listening to control. Your words become tools in their hands. They twist your sincerity into guilt, your explanations into weakness, your vulnerability into leverage. Silence, then, is not avoidance, it's protection. It's a boundary that says, you no longer get access to my energy. Strategic silence is not the same as the silent treatment manipulators use. The silent treatment is a form of punishment, a weapon designed to cause confusion and anxiety. But strategic silence is clarity in action. It is the decision to disengage from what is toxic, circular, or deliberately deceptive. It is choosing not to argue with someone who has no intention of being honest. It is ending the cycle, not with dramatic exits, but with the quiet strength of stillness. That stillness speaks volumes. It says, I've seen the pattern. I understand the game, and I'm no longer playing. When you master the strategy of silence, you become difficult to control. You no longer respond to every provocation. You don't chase closure. You don't explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that your energy is sacred, and your peace is not up for negotiation. Manipulators, when met with silence, lose their grip. They thrive on chaos, and silence gives them nothing. No chaos, no feedback, no fuel. And that is what weakens them more than any argument ever could. In silence, you reclaim your power. You move from reaction to intention. You stop operating on their terms and begin acting on your own. You make space for truth, for strength, for healing. The strategy of silence is not about being unheard, it's about being untouchable. You no longer need to raise your voice because your presence, your restraint, and your stillness already speak with authority. And that kind of silence, the calm refusal to be moved by manipulation, is the loudest message of all. There comes a moment in every conflict with manipulation and evil where a decision must be made. Will you pursue victory at any cost, or will you preserve your integrity? This choice defines not only the outcome of the battle, but who you become in the process. Too often, people chase the feeling of winning so desperately that they abandon their values to get there. They stoop to deception, cruelty, or pettiness, mirroring the very behavior that hurt them. And while they may feel triumphant in the moment, what they've really done is sacrifice the one thing that makes their victory meaningful, their truth. Integrity is what separates the strong from the merely reactive. It is the commitment to remain aligned with your values, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's painful. It's the quiet refusal to compromise your character for short-term satisfaction. When you choose integrity over victory, you are not saying the wrong done to you doesn't matter. You are saying your soul matters more. Manipulators try to drag you into emotional chaos because they know that's where your moral compass begins to wobble. When you stay grounded in who you are, you disarm their power completely. Because they cannot fight what they cannot corrupt. Choosing integrity may not give you the final word in the argument. It may not earn you applause. It may not even be understood by those watching. But it will give you something far more valuable: peace. The kind of peace that can't be shaken by others' opinions, by false accusations, or by temporary defeat. Integrity is not always loud. Often it shows itself in restraint, in silence, in walking away from what doesn't serve you. It shows up in the refusal to slander, to gossip, to retaliate. It shows up in the decision to respond with dignity rather than destruction. Manipulators want you to believe that if you don't fight back on their level, you've lost. But the truth is, you win the moment you refuse to become like them. You win the moment you stop needing their downfall to justify your worth. You win the moment you protect your values, even when every emotion tells you to abandon them. That is a victory that cannot be undone, reversed, or taken from you, because it is rooted not in the illusion of control, but in the strength of character. The world may measure success by dominance, by applause, by visible victories, but real power lies in moral clarity, in choosing to rise instead of sink, to hold firm when everything tempts you to fold. When you stand in your integrity, even if you walk away with no praise or public triumph, you leave the situation with your soul intact. And that is the kind of win that lasts far beyond the moment. It shapes who you are becoming. It preserves your peace. And in the face of manipulation and evil, it remains the highest and most unshakable form of strength. Confrontation is often seen as either an act of aggression or an act of weakness. Either you explode and lose control, or you avoid it altogether and let others walk over you. But there is a third way: direct, calm, principled confrontation. This kind of confrontation doesn't seek to dominate or to be dominated. It exists to clarify truth, establish boundaries, and refuse complicity in manipulation. It requires strength, not because you're raising your voice, but because you're refusing to lower your standards. When you confront someone without being corrupted by their energy, you're no longer reacting, you're responding. And there's a world of difference between the two. Manipulators count on chaos. They rely on emotionally charged moments to confuse and disarm you. If they can provoke anger, they can deflect from accountability. If they can trigger guilt, they can regain control. This is why confrontation must be strategic and grounded in truth, not emotion. Facts are your ally. Precision is your power. You don't accuse, exaggerate, or beg for understanding. You speak the truth simply and clearly. This behavior is not acceptable. This conversation will end if it continues like this. I will not be manipulated. These are not declarations of war. They are declarations of self-respect. Staying composed during confrontation doesn't mean you don't feel anything. It means you've learned to channel your emotion, not be ruled by it. It means your voice may shake, but your message remains unshaken. The goal is not to make the manipulator feel bad. The goal is not to win their approval or prove their wrongdoing. The goal is to make your stance unmissable, to protect your boundaries, to assert your truth without needing their agreement. Because the moment you need their permission to stand up for yourself, you've already surrendered your power. Sometimes confrontation reveals exactly what someone is made of. A person with integrity will reflect when confronted. A manipulator will deflect, gaslight, or escalate. Let that reveal guide your next steps. Do not argue with denial. Do not plead for empathy. If someone shows you who they are when faced with accountability, believe it. Confrontation is not about changing them. It's about being clear with yourself. It's about choosing to see reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Confrontation done with clarity and calm is not a loss of control. It is the very definition of control. You are choosing how you show up. You are choosing how far you will go and how far you will not. You are choosing not to be dragged into emotional chaos. This is how you defeat evil without becoming it, by speaking truth without hate, by holding ground without cruelty, and by refusing to let anyone else dictate the terms of your worth. Let others play their games. You are here to end them, not through destruction, but through the steady, unwavering force of truth. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself with force, words, or resistance. It is the strength of walking away, of turning your back on what no longer honors your peace, even when every part of you wants closure, explanation, or justice. Walking away is often framed as weakness, as giving up, backing down, or quitting. But in truth, walking away from what diminishes you is one of the most powerful declarations of self-worth you can ever make. It says, I will no longer fight for what devalues me. I choose my energy over this entanglement. And sometimes, that is the most courageous fight of all. Manipulators use your attachment against you. They weaponize your empathy, your hope, your desire to be understood. They pull you into endless loops of confusion and contradiction. Not because there's anything to resolve, but because they know you'll stay as long as you believe there's still something to fix. That's the trap, the illusion of resolution. The idea that if you just say the right words, ask the right questions, or give one more chance, it will finally make sense. But it won't, because their goal is not clarity, it's control. And the only way to win a game like that is not to keep playing. It's to leave the board entirely. Walking away isn't just a physical action. It's an internal decision. It's a mental, emotional, and spiritual turning point where you reclaim your authority and decide this ends here. It's not done out of spite. It's not about proving anything to them. It's about proving something to yourself, that you value your well-being more than their approval, their validation, or their attention. It's about choosing peace over chaos, truth over illusion, and dignity over drama. And once you make that choice, you begin to breathe again, not just in your lungs, but in your life. They may call you selfish, cold, disloyal. They may try to draw you back in with guilt, charm, or fear. But your job is not to manage their reaction to your growth. Your job is to protect the version of yourself that almost forgot how much she or he was worth. You're not walking away because you hate them. You're walking away because you love yourself enough to stop bleeding for someone who never planned to stop the cut. Let them misunderstand you. Let them twist the story. Let them say what they will. Truth doesn't need to be defended. It needs to be lived. And walking away is how you live it. Not with bitterness, but with resolve. Not with revenge, but with self-respect. The strongest move is not always to stay and fight. Sometimes the strongest move is to walk away in silence and never look back. Not because you're weak, but because your soul deserves to be free. Time is a force manipulators cannot control. No matter how carefully they spin their lies, how thoroughly they orchestrate confusion, or how convincingly they rewrite the story, time has a way of revealing what manipulation tries to hide. The truth, though delayed, has a voice that only grows louder with time. And patience, real patience, is the quiet strength that trusts this process. Patience isn't passivity. It isn't doing nothing. It is choosing not to act from desperation. It is holding your ground while allowing the truth to surface in its own way, in its own time. Manipulators rush you. They want instant responses, quick forgiveness, impulsive decisions. Why? Because reflection gives you clarity, and clarity breaks their control. The longer you wait before reacting, the less likely you are to be caught in their emotional net. When you are patient, you give yourself space to see what's real, to weigh your choices, and to reclaim your own rhythm. In a world that pushes urgency, patience is an act of rebellion. It tells the manipulator, you don't get to set the pace anymore. It tells your soul, I will not be rushed into sacrificing myself again. Time doesn't just expose others, it heals you. The more distance you create from a manipulative situation, the more clearly you begin to see its patterns, its damage, and your worth outside of it. You start remembering who you were before their influence and who you are becoming beyond it. You begin to detach not just emotionally, but spiritually. Time helps you process without pressure, to let the pain rise and fall without acting on it. It gives you room to grow back into yourself, layer by layer, truth by truth. And yes, there will be moments when it feels like nothing is happening. No justice, no recognition, no relief. But trust this, silence is not absence. Delays are not denials. What you are building in stillness will stand longer than anything built in haste. Patience is not what weak people fall back on. It is what strong people choose when they are building something that lasts. You don't need to see immediate consequences to know that truth is working. You don't need public vindication to be privately victorious. What matters is that you stayed rooted, grounded, and unshaken. Manipulators may seem to win in the short term. They may appear convincing, persuasive, even admirable. But time wears down falsehood. It sharpens truth. It reveals character. And when it does, those who waited with integrity will be standing, while those who relied on deception will be exposed by their own patterns. Trust in that. Trust in yourself. Let time do its work. Not because you're waiting for them to fall, but because you're focused on rising. Patience, when paired with wisdom, is a quiet, unbreakable form of justice. Justice is often seen through a personal lens, something owed to us, something we must go out and claim, something we demand to feel whole again. But justice, in its highest form, is not a personal vendetta. It is a principle that transcends emotion. It is about truth being honored, not egos being satisfied. When you've been wronged by manipulation or evil, the pain is real and deep. But the temptation is to make justice about payback. That's where many people get stuck, trying to balance scales that were never theirs to hold. True justice doesn't always look like revenge. It looks like accountability, restoration, and alignment with what is right, not just for you, but for everyone involved. Seeking justice with integrity means you don't twist the truth to win. You don't use the tools of the manipulator to defeat the manipulator. You don't lie, defame, or sabotage in return. It means you rise above personal emotion and ask yourself, what outcome truly serves the greater good? What response will protect the dignity of others while still defending your own? Sometimes justice means speaking up. Sometimes it means stepping aside and letting truth take its course. Sometimes it means legal action, difficult conversations, or uncomfortable exposure. But always, it means staying rooted in principle, not in rage. Manipulators will often claim that your desire for justice is an attack. They'll call it revenge, exaggeration, or bitterness. This is part of their defense. They want to frame your courage as cruelty. But when your motives are clean, when your actions are measured and your truth is clear, you don't need to justify yourself. Justice doesn't require permission from the guilty. It only requires that you stay aligned with truth. And truth, when pursued with humility and strength, is a force they cannot silence. It's also important to understand that justice may not always arrive in the way or timeline you imagine. Not every manipulator is exposed. Not every liar is caught. Some will continue to deceive others long after they lose access to you. But justice beyond the self means you can accept that some battles are bigger than your personal story. You trust that what's done in darkness cannot stay hidden forever. You trust that the truth has its own timing, and you let go, not of accountability, but of control. You don't have to carry the weight of proving, punishing, or exposing everyone who has wronged you. You are not the judge of the universe. Your job is to walk in truth, live with integrity, and refuse to become what hurt you. That is the deeper justice, that you are free, unchained, and no longer shaped by the damage they caused. Justice beyond the self is not just about what happens to them. It's about what happens in you. And when your soul is no longer poisoned by the need to punish, that's when justice has already begun. There comes a point where the question is no longer about who hurt you or how deeply, but about who you choose to become because of it. This is where grace steps in. Grace is not weakness. It is not surrender, nor is it an excuse for those who've done wrong. Grace is strength under control. It is the quiet power to rise above the wound without letting the wound define your legacy. Grace is when you could retaliate, but you don't. You could expose, but you don't need to. You could hate, but you choose not to, because you've come to understand that your life is bigger than the pain that tried to break you. What makes grace so powerful is that it breaks the cycle. Pain wants to reproduce itself. Hurt people hurt people. Manipulators want to plant their chaos in you so that it grows and spreads long after they're gone. But grace says, it ends with me. Grace chooses healing over hatred. It chooses peace over punishment. And it does so not for their sake, but for your own. Grace doesn't mean forgetting or tolerating injustice. It means you no longer let the injustice control the story of your life. You are no longer just reacting to darkness, you are creating light. There is something unforgettable about people who carry grace. They walk differently, speak differently. They radiate a kind of authority that doesn't need noise to be felt, because they faced pain, betrayal, and injustice, and didn't let it turn them bitter. That is a rare kind of strength. It doesn't come from avoiding hardship. It comes from standing in the fire and choosing not to let it turn your heart to ash. The world is full of people seeking revenge, but the world changes because of those who choose grace instead, those who choose to grow instead of retaliate, to rebuild instead of destroy. Your legacy is not built in the moment you are wronged. It is built in the moments after, in the choices you make when no one is watching, in how you treat others, even when you've been mistreated, in how you speak of people who tried to silence you. Will you become a mirror of their darkness, or will you become evidence that it is possible to go through the worst and still emerge with dignity? That's the legacy of grace. Not perfection, but transformation. Not softness, but strength without cruelty. Not silence, but wisdom in when and how to speak. When your life reflects grace, you become untouchable. Not because you avoided harm, but because you outgrew it. You stopped carrying what wasn't yours. You walked through the storm and didn't let it drown your light. That light is what others will remember. Not the pain, not the betrayal, but the fact that you walked through all of it and still chose to lead with love, with truth, and with unshakable grace. There will always be a choice. When evil confronts you, when manipulation twists your words, poisons your peace, and tests your limits, you can either sink into the darkness it brings or rise into the truth that still lives within you. This is not just a decision made once. It is a decision made again and again, often in silence, often in pain. And yet, every time you choose to rise rather than sink, you reclaim something sacred, your power. Because rising doesn't mean pretending you weren't wounded. It means refusing to let that wound decide who you become. Manipulators want to see you sink, not always physically, but emotionally, spiritually, morally. They want to pull you into their chaos, watch you self-destruct, see you mirror their behavior so they can justify their own. That is how they win, not by defeating you outright, but by transforming you into a reflection of themselves. But when you rise, you break that pattern. You declare without needing to speak it aloud, you do not own my story. To rise is to remember your identity, your values, your voice, and to let those guide your response, even when rage or fear tempt you to go low. You rise when you choose not to retaliate in kind. You rise when you protect your peace instead of chasing someone else's approval. You rise when you stop trying to prove yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And sometimes you rise simply by walking away from the battle altogether, not because you lost, but because you outgrew the need to fight. Rising isn't always dramatic. Often it's quiet. It's a refusal to shrink. It's a decision to keep your dignity, even when no one is watching. And that quiet choice changes everything. Let others choose pettiness. Let them lie, deceive, manipulate, or slander. That is their path, and it leads exactly where it belongs. But you are choosing something higher. You are choosing healing over destruction, truth over illusion, and integrity over impulse. That does not make you naive or soft. It makes you powerful in a way manipulation will never understand. It makes you a threat not because of how loud you are, but because of how unshakable you've become. You were never meant to sink into the mud of someone else's darkness. You were meant to rise above it, not untouched, but undefeated. The scars you carry are not signs of failure. They are signs that you faced darkness and still chose light. And that is the greatest victory of all. In the end, evil doesn't win by harming you. It wins only if it changes you. So don't give it that power. Rise every time. Rise with grace. Rise with truth. Rise and never look back. Because your strength is not in how loud you can roar, it's in how deeply you refuse to fall.